Today, I'm speaking with Dennis, who is based in New York. Before I share our conversation, just a reminder, if you're interested in joining the Patreon for the Other Autism, you can head on over to patreon.com/the Other Autism. That's all one word. If you're listening and watching on YouTube, you'll notice I changed the background just a little bit. I moved the Other Autism sign. It was kind of bothering me to have it behind me because I would often, my big head would cover part of it and my lights would reflect off the acrylic part of the sign. We'll leave it for now and see how it goes. And without further ado, please say hello to my guest for today, Dennis.
My name is Dennis Bourne. I'm 41 years old. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. I am a late diagnosed autistic adult. That came only 2 years ago now. But before that, I was diagnosed ADHD before that. So that was my identity for a large majority of my life. And then I noticed, things that weren't aligning with that diagnosis, which led me down to that path to finally get diagnosed. Yeah, so born and raised in New York, half Puerto Rican, half Costa Rican, primarily Hispanic. My interests are I'm a martial artist. I'm a personal trainer, still actively sparring and competing. I have my own brands. I'm a geek. I'm a gamer. I love anime. I love all that good stuff. The biggest thing about me is I'm a huge proponent for health, wellness, personal improvement. All those things came as a result of me trying to feel better about existing in society, and basically a lifelong mission that started since I was a teenager of trying to fix myself and always asking myself, what's wrong with me? What are the things I can do? And the long-term benefit is that a lot of those habit changes stuck with me and I was able to better myself as a person. But it wasn't until the last couple of years that I realized how much of it was not actually my fault. The struggle of knowing when are you able to forgive yourself and say, this is not my fault, and hold yourself accountable for things that you could have controlled, I guess that summarizes me. And I'm happy to be here because after my diagnosis, I went through that period, which I think we all do after our diagnosis, of trying to find our tribe and trying to find like-minded people and see who's out there and what support is out there. And surprisingly, there's such a lack of support. And as I did the research, I realized we don't have a voice, we don't have a leader, we don't have strong representation. And also, as to get into another topic of marginalized groups and underrepresented groups, it's like neurodivergent autistics of all walks of life from all countries are underrepresented and misunderstood across the world.
I was curious, you mentioned ADHD. So I'm curious to know like when you got that diagnosis and if they assessed for autism, just out of curiosity.
I guess I'll start from the beginning with ADHD. So I always knew there was something wrong in terms of my attention span, always beating myself up, feeling a certain way, being able to excel at certain things, like being able to build a computer and teach myself how to build a computer from scratch and successfully doing it just because I wanted to, but then not being able to pay attention to computer engineering class. When I tried to major in computer science in college and I just couldn't do it. And I'm so mathematically challenged when it comes to formulas and letters and algebra is completely foreign to me, but then I can do percentages in math and but it's just the way my brain's wired. The ADHD self-diagnosis was, I want to say, about 10 years ago now. But then I seeked help and I saw a few different therapists who all agreed. Some were quicker to medicate me than others. But I did make the choice to go unmedicated because the first time I did try a version of Adderall, I just didn't like the way it made me feel. I did it for a month and I felt so artificial that I decided to try to manage those symptoms, without the help, which took a lot of work. But as I got more involved in accepting that part of myself, I re-enrolled in school and I realized I could only ever study something that I really care about. So whether or not I was deciding to do something with my degree, I decided I'm going to take health. I'm going to take the thing that I'm passionate about, and was able to manage the ADHD symptoms in terms of the executive dysfunction. But then I got involved in, and I don't know if you know, ADDCA, ADCA. So they do support for ADHD and through taking their life coaching course, because I was really trying to get into this and really identify myself, I noticed a lot of things that I felt were not aligning with the classic ADHD symptoms, because ADHD is mostly going to address executive dysfunction and the different types of attention, inattentive type or hyperactive type, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was one class that they taught about the ADHD autism overlap. And then I started seeing this side of the tree. And I'm just like, wait, that's me, and that's me, and that's me. Like the eye contact and the human connection and the emotional dysfunction, all these things, the stimming and So I started really thinking about it, and then I took some, a lot of free tests, and I didn't want to self-diagnose because that's a big thing to tell people nowadays. And then finally, yeah, I want to say about a year and a half to 2 years ago. I don't have the exact date, but I saw it. I went through a place that actually diagnoses for this and accepts my insurance. They did a whole questionnaire process where they sent a questionnaire to my sister. They wanted to speak to somebody who knew me as a child, and then somebody who knows me now, and then cross-reference with the way they diagnosed, and then I went through extensive interviews, and then yeah, it came back with like level one least support needs, which for me, like, and the thing is, a lot of people were asking, like, you get the mixed reactions. I feel like you're gonna get one of maybe three reactions. You're gonna get just complete blank stare, like, huh? Like, no, you're not. I've known you your whole life, but they don't know what they're looking for signs. You got this the people who are like, why do you feel like you have to know this? What does this do for you? Like, they don't understand. I got a lot of that from people close to me. And then maybe look at the few people that were like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like my ex-girlfriend was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense, Me and you agree where for me it was a life-changing thing where I was at least able to literally relive my whole life through this new lens and be like, that explains that, and that explains that, and that explains that. So yeah, so this is how we got here now. And again, I was trying to find my tribe and just trying to find what's out there, and came across you just by searching like what podcasts are out there, who's talking about this stuff. So just the fact that you're even doing this, I respect it, and just being able to create this conversation space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about, and thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, you wrote about being Hispanic and autistic in New York. And so, what are some things like experiences you've had that might be different from someone who is not Hispanic or does not identify as Hispanic?
Just in a general view, as I was researching just the state of autism in the world, I realized a lot of culture don't even have a word for autism. I think Indian culture doesn't have a word for it. This is all new science for, and depending on who's on board at, what time. So not even like speaking about autism, just literally speaking about going to a psychiatrist or mental health is not, it's not a conversation topic in the Hispanic community, especially in New York, Puerto Rican communities, like worrying about appearance and how you look to other people. How does our family look to those families? And what will people say about us? So like from birth, you're trained to, especially with the males, machismo, don't show weakness, that's the cultural side of it. And then growing up in New York, growing up in Queens, New York, especially because I'm 41, so as a child in the 90s, it's New York culture to hang out with your boys and crack jokes on each other. And there's always going to be one that gets picked on in the group. There's always like the one that gets the most jokes, so like so again, just the whole even entertaining the aspect of saying anything like ADHD and things like that was not even in the conversation. And even if you get into it nowadays, it's just like, oh, they're just slow, it's just slow without any interest in trying to deep dive any further than that. And then another struggle with me was the fact that I'm the youngest I have two older siblings. I have an older sister, well, two older sisters, and my parents are both first generation immigrants, Costa Rica and Puerto Rico, my mother. So when they moved, they had to go through the whole integration period of trying to fit in. Like my mother hung out with like a lot of, Italians and things like that. It just kind of conformed to American culture a lot quicker. And then, by the time I was born, they were speaking full English in the house. Like my older sister can speak Spanish, but then the middle one speaks a little bit less. And by the time I was born, just English, and nobody taught me Spanish really. So to this day, I don't know if it's part of my learning disabilities that I just couldn't. Even when I tried to learn Spanish, I never really could pick up on it. So like I know a lot of words, but I can't fluently speak it. I can't have a conversation. When I was a baby, I never want to be held. I didn't want to be touched. So one of my I show up as very touchy. Sudden touches are upsetting to me. Loud noises, sensory overload. So they would always tell stories of when they would pick me up, and the family would always pick me up. I would always just say please, like that was one of my first words, and just to ask me to put down. And I never wanted to be touched. I didn't want to pass by. I was like the kid in the corner. So I came out like that, where I'm like already viewed as kind of being like slow or shy, and then I wasn't really learning Spanish, and then I was also chubby. So in Hispanic culture, they'll often give kids nicknames. So I was gordo, which is just fat. So it's just like, all right, so my name is Fat now. That's it. So I'm just this shy kid who can't speak Spanish. My name's Fat, right? So childhood was a little rough growing up with family and everything like that. I never really fit in with family. I always felt like I was on the outside. Most of my extended families, like cousins, things like that. I just feel like it was double hard there because even if there was any kind of knowledge to seek support, I wouldn't have gotten the support, honestly. So then you add to the fact that in New York, Puerto Ricans, Hispanics tend to grow up with black, black kids, black American kids. So just a lot of cross hanging out, and the culture is the same. Where it's like even in the Black communities, like some of my best friends, there was no conversation in mental health. It's always just about trying to look tough, trying to like just survive. Really just trying to hang out with the right group of people while not being harassed by this group of people. I feel like there's just a very big lack of support, and one thing I got this phrase from, I saw this in a TED talk actually, but there's also a racial component to like autism where like in the TED talk they said something like, I want to quote the person, but I forgot the name, but they said, close your eyes, right? And just picture an autistic person. Most people would picture Rain Man type person, or the poster child. You're not picturing this Puerto Rican kid growing up in Queens. Like that's the last thing you're picturing. So even when you associate autism, neurodivergent, you're thinking of a typical type of person, right? I guess it's the lack of recognition that it exists in all communities, and then it's the lack of support within your own community as well. So I'm more likely to get support or help from people outside of my own community as opposed to people within my community, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Did you find that I know for a lot of people, like we end up sort of glomming onto other neurodivergent people as children or teens, or who
Yes.
later end up being neurodivergent. So did you have that at least? Like, did you have some friendships or, supportive people around you?
I think as I grew up and started really, as you learn the traits of what to look for and what stands out as neurodivergence, you realize how much you are attracted to it, right? So like I realize now two of my ex-girlfriends who I still speak to are both neurodivergent. We didn't realize at the time, but as we get older, we learn about it. I'm just like, you definitely have a different form of ADHD, and one of them had like a form of Tourette's. My friends growing up were always like the outcasts, geek, kind of people. Like I'm pretty sure one of them, undiagnosed, is probably autistic as well. But I learned also not to try to diagnose people. I went through that phase too of trying to like spot everybody. I think we all go through that phase too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, trying to like find celebrities. I went through that already. But yeah, definitely. I'm always attracted to like the underdog, the underserved, the underprivileged. Yeah, I would try to like survive around the popular kids and find ways to survive, but I always hang out with the outcasts. A lot of kids in the same situation, lacking the type. Like my dad's around. I love my dad, but there was a certain type of guidance that I needed that I was not quite getting. That I found in things like, well, Bruce Lee, like martial arts, Dragon Ball Z anime, Ninja Turtles, like all the strong role model types. Ninja Turtles because the brotherhoods. I always wanted brothers. I love my sisters, but I always wanted brothers just to have that camaraderie. So I think a lot of us found community just in looking up to superheroes, male role models, because again, any male child growing up kind of needs that. They need that guidance. And even as an adult now, when I go to work and in my professional career, like I look to strong leadership. Like I know how to lead, I know how to teach, but you always need to be a soldier and a teacher. Whether those lessons come from fictional media or a person, that we all need that. But most of mine came from like again, comics, video games, characters like that. And if they served me well because I still carry those lessons with me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I was wondering if you could speak more about your, interest in health and in martial arts and how that supported you.
So I would say definitely the strong martial art interest came from my first exposures. So definitely Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, all those things. Earlier Bruce Lee movies. And the funny thing is, the first Bruce Lee movies was not even Bruce Lee. There was a whole bunch of like knockoff Bruce Lee movies that came out in China that I was exposed to thinking was Bruce, but just the martial art aspect drew me to it. And then I was exposed to the real Bruce, like when I was a teenager, and I learned his lessons. But definitely the earliest exposure was like, yeah, video games like Street Fighter, yeah, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles. So just the interest was there, but there was always the fear of actually doing it. The only option that you really had at the time was traditional karate schools, which are very kid based, and so I always wanted to do it, never did. But I was unathletic in high school. I feared the running test during gym time. I started smoking cigarettes in high school, trying to be cool. So I was also like out of shape, and my lungs were compromised. After high school, I started going down the bad route of like, while it was illegal, selling weed and stuff like that. Back in New York when it was a bigger crime, and just getting into trouble, things like that. And one of my friends was we were smoking and hanging out, and one of my friends was watching a Bruce Lee movie, and it was like real Bruce Lee. It was Game of Death. And that's when like I had like that universe moment, that epiphany. I was just like, this is so cool. This is amazing. I love this guy. And then I started researching him. And then this is when I was maybe 18. And then another friend of mine, out of nowhere, was like, there's a school in the city that we discovered that it's like it teaches this style. And I looked at it, it was like Bruce Lee style. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And it happened like so soon after that movie exposure. So then I started training. It was rough in the beginning, but I just kind of threw myself in there. So that was when I was 19. And then since then, it's just been an on again, off again journey, but it became such a part of my life that even during those off again times, I always found my way back to it. And that's as far as the martial art goes. Now, as far as the other part of the health and wellness is, again, the whole identity thing of feeling like there has to be something that I'm doing wrong that's making me feel this way. Like there has to be a reason why I'm nervous all the time, or why this anxiety or this hyperactivity, which I didn't even realize it was hyperactivity. I just understood it to be this like feeling in my stomach, this unchanneled energy, right? So I was always researching supplements and things like that, and then just over years, just consistently researching and trying different things and using myself as a guinea pig. I've tried juice fasting. I've tried. I was vegan for a little while, vegetarian. Then I tried all types of diets. Intermittent fasting on and off, which I still do sometimes, but I've tried different extreme diets to finally reach a point now where I'm just kind of on just a whole foods diet, to just basically just eating like one ingredient foods, minimally processed, no seed oils, minimum carb, minimum sugar. And it's been working for me. It's been working very well. And basically, I guess that sense of service that we have, that neurodivergents are known for, I just try to work on myself and always like what I've decided is I try to be an example for other people to show that it's possible, right? Especially for people in my age group now, anybody who's 40 and above, I'm really about fitness over 40, because now I'm looking around and I'm seeing people that I grew up with having knee problems and knee surgeries and struggling to go up and down the stairs and all this, things that happen to us as we age. And meanwhile, I'm over here fighting and doing sparring videos and doing all this stuff and pushing my body and getting better. And I'm just trying to show like this is possible. These things are possible, but there's a step to it. So I'm just trying to lead by example. And I guess that's currently my mission, while also trying to be sort of a role model for neurodivergence as well, to just to show that I understand what the struggles are and try to give advice in those regards. Because the last thing I'll say is I'm not going to get into the details about where, but at my job at a very large company, they employ a lot of neurodivergents, and I know who they are, and a lot of them are like 20 something. So I just look at them and I see the struggles they're going through, and I can say like, I know what that feels like. I know what you're going through. I know this unhealthy reaction will lead to this. So I try not to push people. I try not to be that guy that's like hovering and giving advice unsolicited, but I just try to let people know like I'm available. That's my big thing. Like listen, if you need somebody, I'm available. And some people have taken me up on that, but that's really it. I just want to be a source for people without being pushy.
Have you found that like a lot of your clients are neurodivergent?
I'm kind of a terrible business person just because of the whole executive function part of it. Like when I'm in the situation of actually doing the work, teaching somebody or teaching in class, or whatever, I'm in the zone. But when it comes to like marketing and advertising, being consistent, I'm pretty bad at that. So I'm just, like I said, I just make myself available. So I'm very sporadic in terms of if somebody reaches out to me, I'm here for them. So and we'll just negotiate how we want to do things, because people are looking for different things. I help people with martial arts training or just general nutrition advice, or sometimes people just want somebody to talk to. But in terms of the martial arts aspect, surprisingly, and that's another thing I talk about, is there is a very large attraction to martial arts from neurodivergence. Very much so, because I'm part of a big community right now, and like half of them are ADHD or neurodivergent. There was a moment that I had where I used to live in Brooklyn, and I was training at a gym over there, and I would always be in the heavy bag area doing my routine and training, kicking and everything, and I would just be in my zone. There was one lady that would like come by sometimes, and she was always wearing a mask. This was close to the pandemic, and just kicking the bag all wrong and just doing her thing. I'm like, it's cool, like as long as you were exercising, right? But she would do her thing in the corner. And there was another guy that used to work out. He looked like he had a mean face, but it looked like he was in the zone, right? And doing his own thing. One day I'm training and I see the lady kind of copying me. I finished my workout, and she walks over and she's like telling me what her workout was. And she's like, did you see when I did this and this and this? And I'm like, she's autistic. Oh, wow. And then we started connecting. And then the other guy, who I always read as a mean face, came over and introduced himself immediately when he saw us talking. And then as we're talking, I'm just like, he's autistic. And I'm just like, Wow. Okay. And then like it was a bell moment. I was just like, they're just trying to burn their energy in whatever way they can, right? Especially ADHD, neurodivergent in general. Like the best way I describe this in neurotypicals, because I let you use a lot of comic book references, is like the Incredible Hulk, right? You have Bruce Banner and you have the Incredible Hulk. Bruce Banner has accepted that he is the Hulk, right? He has this unchanneled energy that's always going to exist in him, and the only thing he can do with it is use it constructively, right? He's got to use it constructively, or he could go crazy and burn down the city, like in the second movie. And that's what it feels like. It's like there's an endless energy, nervous energy. There's just that you have to channel somehow, because if you don't get it out, it can turn self-destructive, or you could just binge eat something, or watch too much TV. So I think that's what we all share, and I think that's where the attraction to martial arts comes from, because it's one of the most relaxing activities you can do after hitting the heavy bag, or just training, and also the fact that we crave the hyper focus so much, but it's so hard to achieve it because you're trying to find the next thing. Where if you're training with a partner, if you're sparring with somebody, you cannot lose the focus or attention, because the consequences are you're going to get hit. All right. So if I'm training with somebody and we're sparring, we're fighting, I have to keep attention, and I crave the hyper focus so much, because again, if one loss of attention, there's a penalty, there's an immediate penalty. So I think, even though yes, it appears to be a dangerous activity, it's also so beneficial for the brain. And then when you finish, it's like, again, you hear about the runner's high. It's that natural euphoria that you can't achieve even when you do, drink or smoke marijuana or whatever. It's just like, it's just different. There's just a certain piece that you gain. So anyway, all that's to say that yes, as you start talking and as you start getting to know your colleagues, you realize a lot of us are neurodivergent. There's a very huge attraction with martial arts, and that's a trend that I keep seeing repeated as I go to different schools and meeting different people.
I've never been in martial arts, but I'm super into fitness, and I was into sports when I was younger, even though I had trouble, connecting with the other teammates because I was different. But
Right.
I loved the actual like doing it, learning the plays. Like for me, it was basketball mainly. But I imagine in martial arts, there's also a draw because there's like instant kind of structure and order. And you
Yes.
mentioned brotherhood, right? So I guess there's like an instant sense of, community,
Yes.
like and shared goals. So I think that would be very advantageous to a lot of autistic folks. So
Yeah, and also the climbing the ladder aspect, the check mark, goal, 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 goal. Because I was training for a long time in different schools where there wasn't really a progression system. Like I did boxing for a couple years. Just to summarize, I've done boxing. I learned out of a gym in the Bronx for a little bit. I trained with a couple of coaches. My main style is Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee style, which is more of a philosophy than a style, but it's a kickboxing, style, you could say, that mixes different martial arts together. I've studied Muay Thai. I mostly like to do striking as opposed to, like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is big right now in grappling, but I prefer to stand up and strike. Where I'm at now is, since I've been doing it for so long, is that I basically do striking. I stand up and I hit people with my feet and my arms. Because it's past the point as Bruce Lee taught, it's past the point of restricting yourself to just one style and saying, like, I do karate or I do boxing. Like, I do everything. I just fight. So, and when I fight, it just comes out in a way of self-expression as opposed to a different style. I think that counts for anything that you learn, right? Like, you put your mind to something and you'll learn a form of something, a basic form of how it's supposed to be done. And so you start to form your own thing. Like, whether you're learning how to sing or play guitar, like, these are these structures, and then you become Jimi Hendrix and you just create something else because now you're expressing yourself. And I think that's the goal of any martial arts. But prior to that, the whole progression system is very attractive, because when I finally found schools that do have the progression system, it feels good to have tangible rewards for your work, just to say, like, I earned this and I earned this, and I think that's also what makes it very attractive. And also it's a way of getting rewarded for something that you're probably better at than other types of awards that neurotypical society would give us, like, doing very good in school when we can do great at some classes and not others, or sitting still at a job, like, being rewarded for being physical and learning a new skill and competing and things like that. And that's a great feeling. So I think, yeah, that's a big part of it.
as you were speaking, I just thought of something, and I don't know if this is a thing, but like trying to get autistic kids into martial arts early. Do you know if that's a thing?
It's not a thing in terms of it being specifically for autistic kids, as far as what I've seen, but I'm pretty sure there's a huge amount of neurodivergent children doing it, because most of the reason why parents enroll their kids is because they're being bullied. they're naturally there. I've never been involved in teaching kids a lot, but I've observed a lot of kids classes. And yes, they're most of the kids are awkward, being bullied. I think the principal of most children's classes are pretty generally serving though. I think that does a job of just teaching you core principles of, standing up for yourself, knowing when to fight, when not to fight, sense of justice, defending your friends, so despite the fact that maybe a lot of schools are very profit minded, you could say, in terms of how they structure and things like that. I think at least for children, there's a value there. And then when you get to an adult, it changes a little bit. From what I can see, there's still a healthy community of kids still learning it. They are most of the customer base, I would say, because the cool kid who's playing football is not in the martial art class for sure. They're
Right.
yeah, they're doing other things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just thought of it because I think I've spoken to some people who are in martial arts and they started later in life. And they're autistic and they said, "Oh, I wish I knew about this sooner." And they
Me
thought
too.
they had like this assumption that it would be, a lot of neurotypicals and they would not fit in the same way they don't fit in at school. But from what I've heard, it sounds totally different.
Yeah, surprisingly the opposite. Yeah.
Just before we change topics, I'm curious to know if you have specific tips for autistic and other neurodivergent people when it comes to fitness, health, and wellness.
We'll start with the food. Let me not get too personal, but somebody in my family is thought to be autistic. They're pretty sure they are. And they acknowledge that one of the struggles they have is texture with eating, right? That's a big thing with an autistic community. Unfortunately, a lot of that texture tends to be like protein, fillets, things like that. The unfortunate part is that you'll see a lot in the neurodivergent community is carbs, chips, macaroni and cheese, on top of the things that already happen to you as a result of ingesting too many carbs and sugar and all that, the inflammation, the way it affects you, the way it affects your mood, insulin spikes, crashes, which affects your energy. On top of the way it affects neurotypicals already, when you add, autistic neurodivergent experience, it just multiplies everything, right? The crashes, you crash harder, and the spikes, you crave even bigger spikes, right? That then rolls into caffeine. So then the caffeine becomes Red Bull. I work with a lot of neurodivergents, and a bunch of them are hooked on Red Bull daily, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, on top of already having hyperactivity, and then constantly having sugar spikes and caffeine spikes is making it a lot harder. So in terms of advice, I would try to find ways to work with your texture palette, but simplify your plate, right? So for anybody, all walks of life, there's a hierarchy to your plate. The most important thing that you should be seeking, the most important theme of your plate, of your meal, is protein. The first question is, what is my protein? What is my protein for breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Because most people are not getting enough protein, unfortunately. There's different mindsets in terms of how much protein. You'll hear 0.8 grams per gram of body weight, which is the low end, which is to not be at a deficit. I would say just shoot for your body weight in grams of proteins. That's the easiest way. So I'm trying to shoot for 175 grams personally, right? First question is, have your protein first, because carbs are so easy to get. You get carbs from anywhere. You get carbs from fruits and vegetables. It doesn't matter. So that being said, like with this person in my family, they don't like meat fillets, but they like ground meat. They like ground turkey. They can eat meatballs. They can eat burgers. So you can have burgers, right? Burgers aren't the worst food, but it's the bun that makes the burger more unhealthy. The actual patty is just animal protein. It's when we put cheese and ranch and big buns and with a side of fries. Now it's no longer a healthy meal. Familiarize yourself with what good sources of protein are: eggs, tuna, and just try to find ways to work with your palate. It's a lot harder if you decide to go, vegetarian or vegan, but it is possible. I have no problem with you going vegetarian or vegan. We demonize animal protein because we're thinking of all forms of how it could be negative to you. So chicken nuggets, which are fried in canola oil, and breaded chicken and fried chicken and chicken wings and all these, it's all about the food prep. It's not about the food. Like at the end of the day, and this is, I don't have studies, but this is scientifically proven that you need to consume enzymes. You need to consume forms of life, which is greens and vegetables and fruit and one ingredient food, potatoes and avocado, salmon, beef, whatever. But when you prepare it, when you deep fry it, when you bread it, when you process it, now it's no longer the nutrient dense food it was, right? So you take a baked potato is good for you. A baked potato or potatoes are good for you. Yes, it's carb, yes, it's starchy, but it's still enzyme, it's still life. But when you chop it and then you deep fry it and then you process it, and then you fry it again out of a bag, it's no longer the food it used to be. Now it's just this processed, soaked in grease food, right? So that's the first thing is make protein your goal, and then have a little bit less of the carbs. And when you do have carbs, just be kind to yourself, right? Because there's a mentality out there. There's the whole and keto's fine. Keto's a perfectly fine way to eat, but it's, in my opinion, not sustainable for a lifetime. It's more of a tool. We demonize rice. Like it's okay, have rice and beans, right? Because rice and beans together, the amino acids together make protein, right? We call that Spanish protein in my community. It's like it's still protein because it's rice and beans, and Hispanics get plenty of protein. We do, trust me.
I love rice and beans.
Yeah, exactly. Like rice and beans is a staple of any cultural diet. It's okay to have rice sometimes. It's okay to have your carbs, especially if you work out. But don't let your carbs be French fries and potato chips and things like that. As neurodivergents, we love to study things. We love to deep dive. So don't look at what the front of the packaging says. Flip it around and look at the ingredients. The ingredients are what tells the whole story. So you want to get things that have the least amount of ingredients. You want to avoid things, which is most things, unfortunately, are made with canola oil, high fructose corn syrup. In the ingredients profile, it goes in order of what the content is. So the first ingredient is what most of it is. If you're looking at something, one of the first two ingredients is high fructose corn syrup. That's a big red flag.
You sent me something, and I think I remember hearing like "let treats be treats again." Was that
Yeah,
something that?
yeah.
Yeah. So that the reason why that I was like, that's really interesting because I feel like autistic people often we get into patterns. And
Yeah.
so like I think you were talking about like you have like a treat food that ends up being like a core staple of your diet. Because we're also like into the routine, it's so hard to change it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's a big saying that I've been repeating a lot and it's been catching on. I was like, yeah, make your treats into treats again. Because the comfort foods that, unfortunately people eat so often, that Snickers that you're having daily on your break from the vending machine in your office, or that, that Starbucks Frappuccino, whatever. Once you consume a food daily, it is now a part of your diet. All right. It's no longer a treat. A treat is something that you have once in a while, and when you have it, yes, you're gonna have a dopamine rush, but it's because you're having the pleasure of it being like a reward or something fun. So like, you have birthday cake only on your birthday or on birthdays because that's not something that you would think you would have every day. Birthday cake is for birthdays, we understand that. But Snickers daily, you just, like I said, you're on the Snickers diet, you're on the candy bar diet. We don't have to quit the foods that we enjoy. That's what something that I try to really get into people's mindset is that, with the whole internet culture with health and everything, it's this all or nothing mentality. It's just like, and you hear it. There's always that person at work who comes in one day and they're like, all right, today I'm vegan. This is it. This time I mean it. And then everybody in the back of their heads are just like, all right, let's give this about a week. Like, unfortunately, it's true because you get these impulse rushes, right? And it happens, you might have just had one day when you had a really good night of sleep and the next day it turned out okay. And then you're just like, you know what, I'm invigorated. And then you want to try this really complex crash diet. And that diet might be like, again, I'm going vegan today or I'm going keto. And now you convince yourself in this one day that you're not going to have any more bread for the rest of your life, or you're not going to have any more animal protein. It's so extreme. And you don't have to do that. Like you really just have to make small habit changes, right? And the same way that you say routine. So let's get into that is you have to take a look at what your routine currently is, right? And it's the classic Einstein mentality of like doing the same thing again, expecting a different result. It's like if you're unhappy with whatever your state of life is, whether it's how you feel, how your energy levels, or how you look, you have to acknowledge, you have to use that self-awareness that we're known for to really look at yourself and be like, okay, where do I begin? You just can't do the crash diet thing. And for me, and I always tell the stories that for me it was sugar and coffee, right? I used to have coffee daily with the sugar, and then I'm just like, let me take the sugar out of the coffee, and now let me have it light, no sugar. And that seems like such an insignificant thing for a lot of people, but the amount of grams of sugar I was intaking daily from having 3 cups a day was a pretty large amount of calories, and was affecting me, affecting my insulin and my energy levels. So just by taking that one thing out, you're not shifting your routine too much, but you have to make a conscious decision. And you have to really be honest with yourself and tell yourself, what is the one change right now that I can handle that I'm going to keep for the rest of my life? And make it as small as possible, right? It has to be something small that you can live with. Like, you know what? When I go to work and I have breakfast at 7 a.m., but I could wait till 9 a.m. Maybe I could wait till 9 because I have a break at 9 a.m. and I'll have a snack. It doesn't sound like a lot, right? But if you can just do that one thing and just say like, and work at that one thing for like a couple of weeks to a couple of months, and then now it's like, all right, that's it. 9 a.m. breakfast, never anything early before that. It becomes routine, and you're now eating less calories instead of having two snacks. You're having one less snack a day. Over time, you will reap long-term rewards. And it lets you a lot of comparison. It's like investing. It's like stock investing. Like I could throw all my money in crypto and lose it just as fast, or I could just throw a little bit in the S&P 500, just a little bit, and over time, it's just guaranteed profit because it's a safe investment. So
For sure, for sure.
yeah. So and so aiming it at neurodivergence and autistics, we're all about routine. So you have to acknowledge what your routine is, whether it be eating, sleeping, your bedtime, your waking up time, and just pick one small place to start that will then snowball into other places. If you then master that, let me move my breakfast ahead, or let me remove the snack. Once that becomes a behavior where you don't even think about it, then you just move on to the next thing. Now it's just like, all right, so let me stop having the daily soda now. Let me have it every other day, and that's it. So it's really just a lifelong journey of making changes that you can live with and accept that this is your life now. Because again, I'm 41, and right now I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. But that's only as a result of a long journey of changes and adjustments I've made since 19, and I've had tons of plateaus. It's just the will to keep getting back on it and just keep looking for that little sense of progression that we all see.
Yeah, one thing I've done, because I identify with the texture thing too. I don't really have trouble with meat so much, but like in terms of just eating kind of junky food, or I really like crispy and chewy texture. So one thing that I've learned to do is just look for recipes that kind of replicate that, but are still healthy. So like I do this like Brazilian crepe that doesn't have oil, but I do add butter after, and then an egg. So it sort of replicates that like crispy chewy thing. And it's way better than eating like, I don't know, some kind of pastry or something.
Yeah, that makes sense because like for me, there's comfort in carbonation. There's such a comfort in bubbles. So for me, I had to replace it with seltzer, which is another good one.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Some people hate carbonation. Some of us can't stand it. Some of us love it. Like if I'm having something salty, I want something carbonated. And over time, it takes a while for your palate to really change. Like it's proven. Like it really does take time. So you have to deprogram your senses. So it's like, after you cut out soda and stuff for a good amount of time, when you do have it, you really do taste those chemicals. You really
Yeah.
taste the unnatural nature of like Coca-Cola and things like that. It's just, and I'll still have it sometimes if there's a party, like, all right, let me have a few sips. It'll literally be a few sips, and I'm just like, let me, because you just feel a difference. And even when drinking, I recently got to a point where I don't want to, and again, I don't want to say like I'm sober, I don't drink anymore, but like because that's too extreme. But I literally will only have a drink if it's like hanging out once in a while, every other month. I'll have like one drink, or just, and again, making it a treat, like never taking it home and drinking it at home. But all that's to say is that when I do have it, like if I have, like I had some sake the other day, we were at a Japanese place, and I really felt it in my stomach because I was away from it for so long that when I had it, it was like I could feel the acid feeling, the pure alcohol. So it was like I was good. I was like a little tipsy. I was like, I'm fine. And then you learn how to enjoy it in moderation. And I think that counts for everything. Well, another lesson I learned is like with that extreme mentality of constantly just quitting things, it's not so much that you need to quit things, but you could replace it. You need to replace things. Like I'm a gamer for so many years of my life because that's my special interest. I'm such a gamer. It's part of my life. But there were so many times in my life when like things would happen, a relationship would fail, whatever, something didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And I would always find a way to blame my interests. I would always come back and be like, man, if I can only do this less, or I would always beat myself up. I would always try to find different ways to rationalize it. And I would always tell myself like, well, while I'm doing this, everybody else is binging Netflix. Or while I'm doing this, these people are playing fantasy football, they're watching sports. I'm not a sport person at all, surprisingly, even though I'm an athlete. But still, like there's that stigma behind it, or any of our special interests. A lot of times, autistic can be into very specific things like trains and things like that. But it doesn't matter what it is. If it's something that makes you happy and gives you peace, because we need that, and that's a whole other topic, is we need that decompression time. But we need that part. All I have to say is there were times in my life where I was just like, I need to quit gaming. I need to stop this. I need to get my stuff together. But it was never a matter of giving up the things you love. It's just adding in the things that you need. So now, like when I wake up in the morning, I'll game first thing in the morning, just a little bit, just to wake up and just play a little bit, and then I'll have my little coffee. But then immediately I go for a 30-minute morning walk. And then every day, I'm doing that every day now. I'm trying to make it a habit. And then I come home and I'll work out for like an hour. And then I'll do a couple things. And then I'll go back to gaming. And it's just like, all right, now I earned my leisure, right? I just added a few chores to do. So that way, when I do go back to my leisure, it's like I earned it. And with the hyperactivity, it's like sometimes I'll get so much done and I'll still be like, I need to be doing something else. I shouldn't be doing this. So it's just being kind to yourself. I think that's hard for autistics. Just acknowledging when you've earned the time you need for yourself. Here's a thing that I'm so passionate about that is so under discussed and looked upon, right? Because what I addressed before, what I was saying was the two things I want to address is the nutrition aspect, which I did, and then there's the exercise aspect, right? So with the exercise aspect, if you really sit down and look at all the advice that's given in terms of exercise, it is so neurotypical serving, because what's one of the first things you hear from all these influencers is like, oh, you got to use MyFitnessPal, you got to get this macro tracker, and then you got to use this exact program, and then you got to count these reps and sets, and then you got to write these notes down, and then you got to the routine aspect, yes, right? But to expect somebody with ADHD or any type of neurodivergence or autistic, for the most part, to macro track, to stop in the middle of a meal and sit down and count calories and make that a thing, and then to count these exact reps and sets, exercise has become so compartmentalized and so complex when it doesn't have to be. In martial arts, it's like it's self-defense, but there's hundreds of styles in the world. But at the end of the day, we have two arms and two legs, like Bruce Lee says. We're all just defending ourselves, right? But there's so many different versions of it, and these strict disciplines. At the end of the day, exercise is simply moving your joints, your limbs, arms, and your legs in different ways. So there's range of motion. So first, this is my shoulder. I want to make sure I can move my shoulder in all ranges, right? That's the first part of my health. If I can't go here, if I can't go too high, I have no business lifting heavy weight. You need to make sure your joints are healthy. So just start doing range of motion exercises. You don't have to count reps and sets. You just have to be more on top of stretching, and the whole philosophy of exercise until failure is very beneficial to me. There's doing an exercise set of like 3 sets of 10. Okay, and then you got to sit there and count. I used to try to work out that way, and I would literally stop counting at 4. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm looking around. I'm always losing count. For me to do that consistently, 4 days a week and never lose count, it's impossible. But if you take a lightweight and keep doing it, if you could do like 20 reps and you're not tired yet, add a little more weight. You do it until you fail. Maybe you got like 15 reps, nothing too heavy or too challenging. Do it till failure, and then you add a little more after a few minutes of rest, and do that till failure. The only thing exercise is when we get to resistance now, is creating resistance against your muscle, so that way you're struggling to move your muscle, bicep curl, push up, tricep, whatever, squats. You don't have to get so fixated on reps and sets, as long as you're feeling resistance on your muscle and you do get that failure feeling, you get that burn. And this is where the self-expression part comes from, right? So you have to get to know, first of all, how your body feels. Don't pay so much attention to external stimulus and things like that. Just figure out what's feeling, how you're feeling. A great way to start, if you don't even want to go up to weights, is resistance bands. With a resistance band, you can put resistance on your joints in any direction, right? I can go this way on my shoulder, I can go forwards, as long as I have an anchor. That's it. And then get used to that feeling of the burn, and then find ways to make it harder. You could change how far you're standing, or you could just increase the reps. So all this is to say is that I stopped counting reps and sets years ago. Right? I'm still losing weight. I'm still in great shape. I'm an athlete. I don't do reps and sets anymore. I exercise based on how I'm feeling, and I go until failure, and then I switch. Right? You can do a set of push-ups, and then do a set of squats, and then go back and do push-ups, and then go back and do squats until failure. And then, is it too easy now? Okay, add a little resistance to it. Maybe now carry weight. Get to know yourself. Get to know what feels good to you. As long as you are creating that difficult movement pattern and progressively getting better. If it feels okay to you, it's exercise. That's it.
I think the other thing that might hold some of us back is perfectionism.
Yes,
Or
that
like
too.
we get like an ideal in our head, and if we can't do that right away, we just get frustrated and we say, well, I guess I'm not doing it at all. So,
Or the analysis paralysis. I was stuck in that for years, where I was so over researching exercise and all this stuff, to the point that I put myself in a corner of not doing it because I was afraid of doing it wrong. because I'm just like I'm gonna fill out this and I'm gonna fill out this, and if you don't get immediate results, you're doing it wrong. And it's just like just start doing the thing.
For sure. That was definitely me too. But then I got into the endorphin high. And so now I just want to chase that and I don't really care how I get there.
Exactly. There's so many ways to get there. Bike ride or run or walk or just get moving. Literally just move. That's it.
So I guess to switch topics a bit, I know from email exchanges, you've mentioned job struggles as a neurodivergent person. So could you tell me more about those struggles?
So yes, I have light sensitivity sometimes. Well, sorry, not so much light, but like sudden, unexpected stimulation, sudden touching. So like the same person that I could like be intimate with, if they unexpectedly touch me, I'm just like, it's just the sudden contact. General space in general, and like again, because mentally I have to put myself into a mode. So like it's like, okay, this is intimacy time. But if not, it's just like get away from me, get away from
100%.
me.
I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to compartmentalize where my senses are going, right? So, and I tell this to the managers at my job is like, I'm like, if we take time and we sit down and intentionally have a conversation, you're gonna get all my attention. But if I'm at work, if I'm literally doing anything else, even small talk in the hallway is gonna be so hard for me. So again, I don't want to say exactly what I do, but the company I work for is known to be very accepting, very diverse, things like that. During my diagnosis, you see, it just goes always blank. So during that period, I was like, I want to spread, awareness and things like that because the company I work for, there's a lot of awareness and things like that. So I learned just how misunderstood it is to the point that people never heard the word neurodivergent. Like they've never heard the concept, right? So there was a period I went through where I was trying to be open about it. Again, I was getting varied reactions. So of course I got one person which is like, well, you don't look autistic. I'm like, okay. Or you don't seem it. Or I would have got, you get that reaction, or you get no, you're not. Like people will just tell you, like, no, you're not. No, like they'll just tell you to your face, like, you're not who you say you are, like as if you're trying to make it up. So where I'm at now mentally is unfortunately is that nobody really cares. Honestly, like at the end of the day, being autistic anywhere in the workplace or in whatever situation you find yourself in is it's us working to make them comfortable, if that makes sense. And I don't want to turn this into us versus them mentality, but the neurodivergent, autistic experience is conforming to what neurotypical society expects regular behavior to be. Even in job interviews, eye contact, make eye contact, sit still, don't fidget, certain parts that are just unnatural for us, and things they teach, right? Things they teach about ways to have proper interviews, ways to build interaction with people. Don't trust people who are shifty. Don't trust people whose body language says this. I'm like, none of that applies to autistics. Like, so what I try to do now is I try to just let people know about the parts of me that may affect our interaction, but I try not to say too much in terms of like I'm an autistic adult, because still it's like it takes more work. Okay, so there's like a few steps to it. There's whether or not they accept you. You have to get past that part. Whether or not they even believe you. And then there's the okay, they believe you, but now you have to explain it. You have to explain how it shows up, or you have to educate them on what it actually means. And then they have to get used to now being around this new version of you that they didn't really know existed before, right? All that's to say is I try to just address the small parts that may affect an interaction. Like you're like, oh, if I just mess up, like, oh, I'm gonna forget your name. I promise I'm gonna forget your name. I apologize. It's just something bad. Like I know every time I meet a person for the first time, I'm going to forget your name. I'm literally looking at you. I'm like, your name is this, your name is this, and then 2 minutes later it's gone. It happens. I had an interview recently. Or I'll address the eye contact maybe if it's in a situation like in an interview. I'd be like, sometimes I struggle with eye contact, just forgive me. It's part of my ADHD. I kind of dismiss it. I say it's part of ADHD, but I still find myself shying away from acknowledging the autistic part. So all that's being said is that every day I go to work or every day I'm around the workplace, it almost feels like a strategy session. It's like I'm always finding in the last 2 years, I've rebuilt and reformed myself into a different person based on things I've been through, right? In the last 2 years, there's like 4 versions of me that you could look back on and say like that's an outdated version of me, and that's an outdated version of me because I kept having to adjust based off of interactions that I've had that went poorly, me being too open with some people, you know, and I work in a place that's very populated. Let me just say that a lot of people work there. So yeah, it's just always going to be a struggle. And I think the biggest part for autistics is just figuring out whether or not we're going to disclose it. when we're going to disclose it, when it's appropriate. I did disclose it on my job profile because one of the disabilities is ADHD, neurodivergent. So I was like, well, I'm not going to lie about it, and it's not going to affect anything. So I'm just going to disclose it, and they don't really question you about it. But it's really, again, it's just a struggle of being honest with people and figuring out whether it's necessary. And again, the masking part comes from, I guess, a little of that imposter syndrome comes out too, where you start asking yourself, like, is this me or is this the autism? Is this something? Is this my fault? Or is it not my fault? You know?
Is part of the challenge then like having to mask?
Definitely. Like I said, we're expected to maintain eye contact. We're expected to, hugging is a lot more frequent now than it ever has been in the past. People are hugging like crazy, right? And that alone is a struggle, because again, I grew up in New York, nobody's hugging nobody, right? We're gonna get a five and that's it, keep moving. So even that, like a group of people, they're hugging each other, and I'm just like, and I struggle with simple greetings sometimes. Oddly enough, I work with my hands. I'm very physically active, but I have a texture sensitivity in my hands. So like sometimes I don't want to shake hands, and you just find yourself having to just put yourself in situations that again are just not necessarily. It will be frowned upon to say no, basically. Like so again, just forcing yourself to hug more, and then the whole needing to just have space. So like it takes so much effort, and energy sometimes to show up, right? To show up in mask, to show up and put the performance on. When you have those burnout sessions, when you have those times where you're almost losing yourself, which brings me back to what I was saying is it's hard to balance both, but then not get the reputation of being a lone wolf. And I find that a lot of times at different places that I go, different jobs I work at, I always get the lone wolf representation. People say like, "Oh, that guy's a lone wolf. He stays to himself. He And I swear it's not on purpose. It's just that I'm so focused on the task at hand because the executive functioning and my job is very involves a lot of multitasking and thinking. And while I'm working on this task and this task and this task, to a neurotypical, it might be easy for them to be like, "Hey guys, how's the weather?" and have a small chat and stop this thing. For me, it's like I have to completely put all my attention onto this human interaction now and try to not act weird and be disrespectful while still trying to do my job. And it's balancing the two. It's hard to attention shift, which is why, like, again, I always say, like, I'd rather have the intentional sit down conversation and say, like, this is talk time,
Right.
and not being able to jump back and forth. So being able to focus switch is probably one of the hardest parts, definitely.
Right. Use the word mode earlier, and that's the word I use as well. It's like if I'm not in the talking mode, I can't talk.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you mentioned hugging, which is interesting because I feel like for me as a female, hugging is more of a thing and it's almost like expected. And we're sort of like seen as like social lubricants, I guess is a word that I've heard.
Right.
So it's like you're supposed to do all the things right. So for me, it's hugging. I do hug, but then I'm like always afterwards. I didn't really want to hug, So
Yeah.
even though I've initiated it sometimes,
Yeah. It's such a uncomfortable thing to tell somebody, right?
yeah,
Like,
don't want to touch you.
yeah, like I'm not
Yeah,
really hungry. Like I
yeah.
literally had a conversation with a coworker and somebody who I trust and I'm cool with, but and it wasn't meant to be disrespectful because he's a hugger, and I was just like, I said it in a way that I wasn't saying I don't want to, but I said it in a way to let him know that I'm adjusting to doing this. And I was like, when I came to this place, I was never really a hugger, but I'm like, I'm learning through more exposure to be more accepting about it. But that's not my go-to word, which he was understanding about, and we're cool like that. But to a regular person, it's just like you just have to do it sometimes, I guess. But there's times when you're just like, I'm not in hugging mode. I'm like,
Mhm.
please, I'm somewhere else, and to turn it down would be very disrespectful. So, like, just for example, like I've been told in relationships in the past that with the unexpected touching that I keep being accused of being not affectionate. Not affectionate enough, not affectionate. But then I'm always like, yeah, but when it's intimacy time, I'm very affectionate and things are good. It's because of that mode switch. They'll like go for my arm or something, and I freeze up and I tense up, and they take it personally as if I just don't want them to touch me. And it's like it's not that I don't want you and to touch me. It's like I don't want to be touched at all in this moment. It's just, and it's not even intentional. It's an unconscious reaction that
Totally.
I
Yeah.
understand why somebody would take offense to, right? I
Hmm.
literally seize up. It happens sometimes. It's uncontrollable. So like, that would be a situation that I was explain to somebody with my partner or if it ever comes up again. But yeah, in regular social situations, it's like it's a constant navigation of trying to read the room and figure out what's appropriate and when to make yourself uncomfortable, right?
How has knowledge of your autistic identity impacted how you view your past experiences, decisions, and or your worldview.
I've seen with your other guests. I actually saw your recent one with the teacher. When we get our diagnosis, there's always going to be that aha moment, and then there's always, again, looking back on the moments that may or may not have been your fault, right? The first part of the journey that I went on was learning what to forgive myself for and what I needed to explain, right? So my entire childhood, all the way through high school, I can say most of that was not my fault in terms of how I showed up, how I was treated, how I was bullied, just trying to fit in, the things I beat myself up about. I know a lot of that. My problems in school, the way I was excellent in one class and would fail math and would fail these other classes, and teachers would call me not motivated and lazy and whatever. Like those parts, I know I could forgive myself for, right? I could look back and be like, that was just the hand that was dealt. Going into my 20s and things like that, I could see that's where the heavy masking really started showing up, was high school into my 20s and trying to figure myself out. But at the end of the day, just to answer the question, after first going through the part of exploring my past and again forgiving myself for failing out of college and having to get my degree late, then I started reflecting on, again, in past relationships, how I was always called unemotional, unreactive, not getting super excited for certain things, and or being hyperlogical, things like that, and having muted emotions in general. Looking at Mr. Spock, who's of course one of our role models, super logical creature. So now that I know that mode of thinking is basically me, right? It's a part of me that I have to accept and live with. Now I'm working in the other way around. So now I am trying to be more intentional and more emotional towards the more important things, and acknowledging that a lot of the other things don't even deserve that attention. So like family and very close relationships, I'm really trying to just be more human and pull those emotions out. But in terms of worldview, now that I understand the logical thinking, it makes life so much easier. It makes life so much easier. So that's the positive aspect of it. So it's like I've basically become this person, unfortunately. I almost feel like an alien, where I stand outside of society, and now I just study human behavior. Right. My rabbit hole of health and wellness went from physical health, which I feel like I've mastered in terms of at least understanding the basics, to mental health and society health and things like that, and interpersonal health, and so it makes me a bit of a leader in some aspects, which makes it easier to teach, and it makes it easier to teach habit changes and all that life coaching stuff like that. So just for example, like the act of getting to work on time to me now is so obviously easy that it's so hard for so many people to do, right? And it's just like it's as simple as, well, the most important thing I can do right now is earn income. All right. I need to earn income in order for me to live and pay rent and things like that. The place that gives me income is my job. So if I'm spending the majority of my time at my job, why would I not put effort to go on time and show up? And just that line of thinking, it's like I think backwards, and I'm like, well, it's so much easier to do this because I understand the logic behind it. But I will admit that it does make me, as much as I try to guide and help people, it makes me very unempathetic sometimes. When in certain situations, like when I hear people always complain about being tired, I always know why, right? It's because one of those things. It's like when you learn something, when you learn all these things, and since I'm such a researcher, I always know the whys, and I know that this person is not acknowledging the why, right? If that makes sense, it's just like, well, I mean, I could tell you why. Look at what you ate for breakfast. How many hours sleep did you get last night? When was the last time you exercised? But that's so insensitive to say to somebody. I witnessed somebody who did not live the healthiest lifestyle pass away, and I made the decision because they died pretty young, 65, I think it was. And I just made the decision. I was just like, I never want to be there. I want to, delay that as long as possible. I want to delay that moment. I don't want to be in the hospital bed for as long as possible. So logically speaking, I'm going to live a life that's going to prevent that. I just love how I understand how my brain works, and I'm just now basically, again, just sticking with logic while trying to squeeze an emotion where I can.
Right. So it sounds like you're sort of leaning into and accepting your autistic traits instead of working against them.
Exactly, exactly. I can get into a pit and fight a guy who's twice my size, no problem, with no fear in my heart, and laugh about it. But then you ask me to sit down with the same guy and have a conversation in a bar, and I'm nervous, and I'm like, what do I say? What do I do? Like,
Yeah.
like I've accepted that that's just a part of my life. It's just something that's nothing I can do about. I've accepted that. When the camera turns off, I'm going to be contorted and all over the place and trying to control my body. And with those negatives, I still, and again, the burnout and social interaction, social battery, I've accepted all those things. I've just accepted how to manage it. And really, since there's so much work that we have to put in to have those interactions, I just try to really pick and choose the ones that are worth the effort. Is this person worth the internal anguish? I know it's a bad word, but the internal anguish and anxiety it's going to cause me to have a regular conversation with this person. Is it worth it? And if it is, all right, let's do this. And I'm going to do the thing. Overall, yes, I would never change a thing because I don't think I would be half the martial artist or I'd be half the researcher. I would be half aware or on top of my habits as I would be if I wasn't autistic. Despite the struggles, despite my upbringing, I'm a believer in the universe and signs. That's where my faith ends. I just follow the signs, and yeah, maybe I have some regrets, but I wouldn't change it honestly.
I do have a question about you mentioned emotions and people saying that you're sort of shut off or something. Like, I'm curious because I've had the opportunity to be around some younger kids recently that are autistic or in the assessment process, and they're very emotional. But I'm wondering if, like, the feedback they get from others, it's like they learn to repress it. Often autistic people will have like an almost like instant reaction emotionally, but we suppress it because
Yes,
we've learned that we're like over the top for a lot of people, or like we're too much.
yes, that's. I think part of that is. I'm sad to say how young these kids are being medicated is part of it. Rocking and hitting your chair and things like that. Like all of these behaviors are viewed as against society. Sit down in your chair. Stop rocking. Sit still. Be normal. I think yeah, we just get trained to suppress it at an early age. I certainly did. I did. So all of my anxiety goes right to my stomach, right to the pit of my stomach. Of course, I learned how to master and suppress it, but I know when somebody gets me upset, when there's a strong emotional reaction, an argument, it's like an explosion in the stomach to my own detriment. I'm suppressing it, and then it's going to turn into stomach cramps and heartburn. It's literally just stress turned to cortisol, just sitting there, and then you have to burn it off, which is where the exercise and things like that come from. One of my triggers, one of the most triggering things, probably one of the most triggering things you can do to an autistic person, is to speak over them. It is to speak over them when they're trying to get a thought out that is important to them, because it's already so hard to have a conversation and to express yourself. But anyway, just to go back to your point, but yeah, yes, I think a lot of it, so much of it is just trained behavior. I used to be a pretty reactive kid. I used to run around the house and things like that, even though I would say to myself, play alone. I also used to like when I was with my friends, we would do physical things and we'd play football and laugh and yell. Like I had some outlet, but especially nowadays, the problem is that kids don't have those outlets anymore. That nobody's playing football in the streets, nobody's playing outside anymore. Everything is all the attention is now going towards social media, iPads. So it's a different world now, and there's so many more distractions than before. So it's like it's a lot more challenging. There's outlets, but at the same time, there's a lot of also misdiagnosing happening. I think just due to the fact of how distracted everybody is and how much external stimulation there is. There's the autistics and neurodivergents who genuinely need help and genuinely are looking for support. And then there's a whole bunch of people who are being diagnosed too soon with ADHD and being medicated when they simply have issues with either, again, poor diet combined with overstimulation, leading to attention issues, which is being diagnosed with ADHD, but it's really not. The over medication and over diagnosing is causing a shift in the worldview of neurodivergence because there's so much yelling about it from mountaintops and it's being heard in the wrong way, if that makes sense.
Like it's sort of trendy. It's like a
Yeah,
trendy thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a trendy thing on TikTok. It's working against them. Because again, when I found you and I was trying to see what's out there, I saw lots of again, not to offend anybody, but I saw lots of what appears to be well-to-do people making funny and trendy videos from nice apartments about neurodivergent life and things like that. And I don't see any representation from the people who are autistic and had a hard life or are now homeless or living in shelters or are being called, the crazy guy in the subway when that guy just never got help. That guy's
Mhm.
autistic, he never got help. That's all it is. The over exposure and the wrong message that we're getting, I think is making it a bit harder for the acknowledgement to happen. There's not a single celebrity or somebody who's really representing it in a right way. Not to get into, names or whatever, but like, we have like people coming out with Asperger's syndrome, multi-million dollar moguls who are Asperger's, but like, well, technically you're autistic, but A, they don't want to say the word. And then on the flip side, they're doing things and acting in a way that works against it, right?
Mhm.
So
A little bit toxic.
yeah, a little toxic. You probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, the Asperger's people out there who are making it harder for us, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's a big part of it too, of what's making it hard to be open, right? That's what it is. It's hard to be open about it because of a lot of misrepresentation.
That makes sense for sure, for sure. What's your favorite video game?
Sure, yeah, we could talk a little bit about that. Definitely my favorite video game of all time is Final Fantasies 3, which in Japan was called Part 6. So anyway, Final Fantasy 6 for the Super Nintendo, and Street Fighter, if we're talking fighting games, which is a huge influence. I think why it's an RPG game, and I think why RPGs are so attractive to autistics and why there's such a strong neurodivergent community is because again, the sense of progression. You start out as this character, and you're weak, and it's a good life lesson, right? A lot of my life lessons I learned from video games and RPGs, things like that. It's like it sends the message that like you're weak, you're level one, you can't even beat these goblins here. But if you keep trying and you keep trying, you get stronger and you get stronger and you level up, and then you could explore a little bit more of the world, and now you could explore this much of the map, and now you level up and you can explore this much of the map. Those type of games send a good message where it teaches you that there's always an answer for progression, right? So you get to this boss, and maybe your strategy isn't correct, but if you go back and you maybe find a different type of armor, you do something differently, maybe you could beat them this way, or games that require you to change your party and change tactics. Just long story short, like I feel like a lot of that type of thinking I was able to apply to my life. I gamify life, and I'm pretty open about it. Even at work, I'm like, yeah, life is like a video game. You just have to gamify it. I'm like, okay, so what's the goal? What's the boss? We want to hit this percentage on our rating for this quarter. All right, so how do we level up even in the smallest bit? What's the strategy? That's all it is. It's making those little changes and sticking to it to reach the next goal. I think that's also why we get so wrapped up in the gaming, is because once you become a gamer, it's so many other forms of entertainment are no longer stimulating enough. When I was a kid, I was like, yeah, I would watch Saturday morning cartoons, and it was the most amazing thing. But then once you get exposed to like games and things like, it's like, well, I could sit here on this couch and watch the thing, or I could sit here and do the thing. That kind of happened to me with sports also, and I could sit here and watch baseball, or I can go outside and actually do martial arts, right? Once your threshold of stimulation increases, it's hard to go backwards.
A huge thank you to Dennis for being my guest on the Other Autism podcast. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.